بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق الهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله وصحبه حق قدره ومقداره العظيم والحمد لله. اللهم لا علم إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم لا علم إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم لا علم إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وزدنا علما. Alhamdulillah. So we're on the bottom of page 33 of this book, looking at this topic of da'wah. And one of the things that he spoke about that we mentioned yesterday was the topic of what we call hawa. Hawa being translated, he's got an interesting definition here in the footnote, actually, the second footnote at the bottom of that page, for those who are following with the Arabic. He says, al-hawa هو ميل النفس الخاطئ ولخطورة اتباعه قال الله جل جلاله ولا تبوا الحق أهواءهم فسدت السماوات والأرض. Yeah, so his hawa, your passion or your caprice, is like a tendency of the nafs. Yeah, it's a tendency, something that you move towards or you incline towards. Yeah, that your preference is for that. It's a preference of the nafs which is incorrect, which is mistaken. It's a preference of the nafs which is mistaken. And by following that, by following his footsteps, this is why we have this ayah in the Quran, the one who followed truth. Yeah, if the followers of truth, if the followers of truth followed their passions, then the heavens and the earth would be destroyed, or the heavens and the earth would become corrupted. So therefore, hawa, we can say, is the root cause. Like we mentioned yesterday, when you're looking at these types of issues of anxiety and depression and these kind of things, is due to our failure to submit or surrender, and due to our desire to follow these lower tendencies within the soul. And this is what leads to this agitation. This is why the ulama, they constantly, one of the things that they talk about a lot, in terms of the caller to God, but also the Muslim in general, is that they say that the caller to God or the Muslim has the qualities of what are called sakina and waqar. Sakina and waqar. Waqar is that outer dignity, outer comportment, outer calmness, that stillness of the limbs and stillness of your outward being. And then sakina, of course, is inward tranquility. Because the human being by his nature is composite. It's been made up of different parts. This is one of the secrets of Islam's acts of worship. Every act of worship, it has a physical dimension. It has a mental or intellectual dimension. And then it also, of course, has a spiritual dimension. That's why the Hajj, for example, is physically, involves endurance. It involves physical acts of worship. We do physical things. Salah, obviously, our prayer is physical. This is one of the secrets of the Isra and the Mi'raj, which we're on the verge of celebrating, which is coming in like, so what, 7th, we're on Sunday today, so in like 3 days, on Wednesday night, 3 or 4 days is coming. And the Isra and the Mi'raj, one of the secrets is, and this is one thing that we need to point out to our non-Muslim brethren, is that it was not an out-of-body experience, which I've heard this from people, or people who, mashallah, they have respect for the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So, we admire that. They might not believe in the Risala, but at least they have respect for the religion of Islam, and they'll say that the Isra and the Mi'raj was an out-of-body experience. No, it wasn't an out-of-body, it was actually an in-body experience. The Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam physically, consciously, he ascended, and that's what makes it even more miraculous. The fact that he was able to maintain consciousness, he was able to maintain presence of heart. His heart was actually present whilst undergoing this journey of going through the heavens and the different things that he saw, and going beyond the 7 heavens, going beyond the tree, Sidratul Muntaha, the tree of the utmost limit, and then entering into the divine presence, conscious of where he was and what he was doing. That makes it even more remarkable miracle. Makes it even more extraordinary that he could consciously be aware of these things. So it was an in-body experience. And this balance is very important. This is why the things like monasticism are very, very problematic. And we see this, look at the Catholic Church, yeah, like, and the problems that have resulted due to people not embracing all aspects of life, which includes the, which also includes the physical. Yeah, which also includes the physical as well as the mental and the spiritual. Yeah, so the human being is composite by nature. We have these three parts. And thus balancing out between these requires that. Yeah, so we have sakina, internal secure peace, and then we have waqar, outer dignity. Yeah, internal and outer, and everything internal pours out and affects our external, and everything external affects our internal. This is something, again, that's maybe missed sometimes, that what we have to understand is when we're doing external actions, they are affecting our heart directly. This is why look at the link between the tongue and the heart. This is why they say the tongue is the tarjaman of qalb. Yeah, it's the interpreter of the heart. Yeah, so it's telling you what's within. But at the same time, what's going on outside is affecting them. What you are seeing, hearing, speaking about, doing, all of that is affecting your internal nature. This is why Mulana Rumi, he says something very interesting. He talks about alcohol, and he says, what are the wisdoms? One of the wisdoms why alcohol is prohibited is he says that when people drink alcohol, it unveils things within them. So this is an example. It's an outer action. You're drinking something outwardly, and it's affecting your internal state, such that you now start to even manifest some of this ugliness to the world. You know, like diseases that lie within. So someone, for example, has got an anger problem. When he drinks, he suddenly becomes very angry. Yeah. Someone has a problem, whatever dimension of life it might be, it exacerbates it, or it brings out these types of things. Yeah? So whatever's external affects the internal. What we're looking at, yeah, what we're seeing, the clothes that we're wearing, yeah, the environments that we're in. That's why one of the teachers, he said that if you see a person with the tahajjud, his house is ugly, that's a sign that his worship is not real. That might sound very strange to us, but this is the reality. Yeah, that beauty, the beautiful soul pours out its beauty. Yeah, so what's internal comes out externally, and what's external affects the internal. It's not by accident that the most beautiful building in history, according to many, Muslim or non-Muslim, is the Dome of the Rock. It's not by accident, and that was built. It was built very early on by beautiful souls who poured out their eternal beauty onto this building. And it's not by accident that the vast majority of Islamic institutes, and not just Islamic institutes, even non-Muslim institutes of education, are based in beautiful surroundings. Why is this? By accident that the Qarwain in Fez is this beautiful, beautiful place, yeah, or Al-Azhar, or Oxford and Cambridge. Wherever you're going to go, wherever you're going to see a manifestation of this beauty. Yeah, you're going to see the fact that the beauty is an essential, an elemental part of this. Yeah, it's an elemental part of this, and appreciating and having an understanding of that beauty allows one, yeah, it allows one to ascend spiritually. Yeah, so we linked, no doubt, internally and externally we linked, and this balance between these different things is what's going to allow us to be successful in this regard, yeah, in terms of calling. Because what are we calling people to? We're calling people to balance. We're calling people to human completeness. So it has to be within us. It must be within us for it to manifest in a way that persuades others, in a way that impacts and changes others. Yeah, so this balance. And again, look at Islam and the dimensions. We have Islam, Iman, and Ihsan, these three dimensions which all come together. Yeah, so we have Islam, which is the outer. We have Iman, which generally relates to our intellectual belief, we can say. Yeah, and then we have Ihsan, which is spiritual excellence, which is when the inner and the outer come together in a beautiful way. Yeah, so all of these things are directly linked. Okay, so if you continue on there, we're looking here. He's talking about, He's talking about Hawa. Then he says, فَاللَّهُ وَاللَّهِ لَا يَذُوقُ السَّعَادَةَ فِي الدُّنْيَا قَبْلَ الْآخِرَةِ إِلَّا شَخْصٌ وَقَفَ بِهَوَاهُ وَعَاطِفِهِ وَمَشَاعِرِهِ كُلِّهَا أَمَامَ هَذَا النُّورِ. Yeah, that he says that by God, you will not experience sweetness. Yeah, you will not experience sweetness in this world. He's talking about paradise in this world. He's talking about experience and happiness, ecstasy, joy in this world right now. This is what religion offers. It doesn't just offer peace and tranquility and joy in the next life. It offers you a beautiful, happy life. A life here that no matter what happens around you, no matter what tribulations and trials you go through, you remain happy and you remain content. This is what's really, when people talk about things like higher consciousness, this is what we're talking about, seeing the bigger picture. When you start to see this is the importance of salah. Why do we pray? We pray because then we have to understand what really matters and what doesn't matter. It contextualizes, it relativizes. Everything else becomes less relevant, less important once we pray properly. So whatever problem we face in our lives becomes less significant, less important, because we've had moments with the divine. And we start to see what it's all about. This higher consciousness becomes triggered. This is what we have to instill within our children. We have to instill this deeply within our children. Like, I remember we did a parenting course with Sheikh Burhan, one of our teachers, and he got people to do an intro. It was like a workshop, and he got people to do an interesting experiment. He said, I want you to take a piece of paper and I want you to write on it physical, mental, and spiritual. 3 columns, right? Physical, draw a line. Right, mental, draw a line. Right, spiritual, draw a line. Because now I want you to think about the time you spend with your children. I want you to think about the activities and the things that you do for your children or with your children. Because and then I want you to write whether those activities benefit them physically or whether they benefit them mentally or whether they benefit them spiritually. Let's look at this. So the people did this, and what came out overwhelmingly, what came back was 95%. 95% of what people were doing in terms of raising their children, nurturing their children, developing their children was related to the physical. And then about 4 or 5% was related to the mental. Spiritual was like less than 1% within this workshop. And that's a general rule. I mean, how much of what we're doing is focusing upon the spiritual? Because if it was focusing on the spiritual, a lot of the times, unfortunately, as we're going to look at in the next section of this book, it means physical difficulty. To become spiritually elevated requires physical difficulty. It requires letting go of a lot of physical care and nurturing in inverted commas. It's not really physical care or nurturing at all, because the point of physical nurturing is to develop himma, to develop the ability to endure and do more. So when we're talking about these issues, when we're talking about our children or even our own selves, we can do the experiment for our own selves. Look at our actions throughout the day. How much of that is to assist us or to help us physically? How much is it to help us mentally, and how much is it to help us spiritually? The majority of what we do is just for our physical well-being. And really, like some of them, this is like it's a one-eyed view, isn't it? All you can see, all the human being sees of themselves is just the physical. This is the disease of Iblis. Why did Iblis, Shaitan, the devil himself, why did he refuse to bow down before Adam alayhi salam? Why? Because all he saw was this flesh and bones. All he saw was the outward. He's just mud and clay. That's all he is. Why should I bow? Why should I bow down? Why should he be better than me? But all he is mud and clay. He didn't see the sir. He didn't see the soul. He didn't see the secret. And that's like us now. We're blinded to that. Our real humanity, our true potential. We don't see that. We don't focus on that. We don't look at that. Instead, there's just an obsession with the outward and improving and being better in the outward realm. But we're not looking inward, and we're not necessarily paying attention to that. This is what higher consciousness dictates. It really does. It dictates that we become aware of the composite nature, the totality of the human being. And once we become aware of that, then we can experience sa'ada, sweetness in this realm. That one of them we mentioned, he said, one of the Arifin, one of the knowers of Allah. Yeah, one of these people who understands that the human being is a spiritual being, first and foremost. He said that if the people of Jannah are experiencing what we experience, then indeed they are in paradise. Oh no, and what a wonderful paradise they must be in. Yeah. So this is Jannah qabla al-Jannah. People who are in the garden, who are in ecstasy prior. Yeah. And this is what we see now when you're seeing great people. I remember many years ago, like this is like maybe 2002, 2003, many years ago, meeting Habib Ali Ajifri for the first time. And one of the things that you immediately notice about Habib Ali Ajifri is that he's in a permanent state of ecstasy, a permanent state of absolute joy and happiness. You notice that straight away from him. You just feel that from his state. He has an aura about him, and you just feel this man is in a state of permanent joy and ecstasy. And you get a taste of him when you're in his presence. It gives you a taste as well out of generosity. Yeah, the power of the human soul to transcend and impact others. Yeah, so you experience that. Now that is Jannah qabla Jannah. Yeah, that there are people alive today, and people, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions throughout generation upon generation upon generation, that have dhawq of sa'ada in this world. Yeah, they experience felicity, happiness, goodness, joy, overwhelming happiness, ecstasy. They experience all of that in this world. So what is Habib Umar here? He's saying, Hafidhullah, he's saying that you cannot experience that unless you submit your own passions and your own tendencies and your own hawa. Unless you submit and let that go, you're not going to be able to. Because this is what hawa is. Hawa is all these habits, these negative habits which have to be replaced by good habits. They have to be replaced. This is why deen, religion, or deen means your patterns of behavior. And this, of course, relates directly back to consciousness. People who are subconscious, they repeat the same mistakes again and again and again. People who are conscious, they get the message. And the Prophet ﷺ said that the believer is not stung by the same hole twice. He's aware of what's going on. Yeah, so he doesn't happen again. I mean, look at the Sahaba, look at Uhud as an example. They got the message straight away. They understood that there's no deviation from the literal word of the Messenger ﷺ, unless he himself has indicated otherwise. You go with whatever he has said. And that's why they say the Battle of Khandaq that came after the Battle of the Trench, the Sahaba, they wouldn't even go to relieve themselves. They'd go to the bathroom without asking permission, because they understood what it means to not take that permission and to not follow the exact words of the Messenger ﷺ. They wouldn't go there because they saw what disaster and chaos ensues once you move away or you deviate away from those types of words. Yeah, so this is hawa. Hawa is a very dangerous thing. Yeah, it's a very dangerous thing, and we overcome hawa through love. Yeah, what happens is that no doubt that we have a deep love for ourselves. Yeah, we have a deep love for ourselves. So how then do we overcome that? Through having a stronger love for Allah. Yeah, that one love overpowers another love. This is how we do it. How do we fight the tendency to be lazy, to want to oversleep? Through motivating ourselves by the sweetness of loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the ecstasy and the joy that brings. Yeah, this is the way we overpower it. Yeah, they mention, like, one of our teachers, someone asked him once about this issue of hawa and how do we overcome caprice? How do we overcome our desire? And he said the essence of it is mukhalafatul nafs. In other words, he said that whatever your lower soul wants to do, you do the opposite. Like Imam Shafi'i said that if I desire to speak, I would be silent. And if I desire to stay silent, I would speak. Yeah, so if he desires to speak, he wants to talk, silence. If he wants to be silent. Why? So people think, oh, mashallah, what a pious person he doesn't speak or he's silent. Then he's going to oppose that as well. So what our teacher said to us, he said that each human being that we have been given a voice. This is one of the great blessings of Islam. One of the great blessings of the human being, Afwan. One of the great blessings of the human being is that we have been given a voice, a conscience. So we have a voice within us that's telling us. And we also have like a negative voice, what they call the nafs al-amara bisu, the lower self. That voice within the Father, Allah has given us that voice, allows us to understand what we need to oppose and what we need to embrace. So he said every time that voice, and is like, he gave this analogy because it's like, what's his name? Gollum. Gollum in Lord of the Rings, this voice, that's telling, is pushing you towards evil. So he says every time you hear that voice, oppose it. Every time you hear it, oppose it, oppose it, oppose it. And he said, if you keep on ignoring somebody, he said, imagine somebody kept on telling you, let's go here, let's go here, let's go, and he kept on ignoring them. After a while, what's going to happen? He's going to leave you alone. And that's what happens with the nafs. The nafs leaves you alone. That internal voice that's calling you to laziness, that's calling you to evil, becomes silent after a while. And we've all seen this in our lives. Like you can see, for example, the example of Fajr prayer. Yeah, many of us know that we're going to wake up. We're not even going to think about staying in bed for Fajr. We're just going to wake up and go and pray. How has that become automatic? It wasn't automatic always. If you think back to when you first started establishing these habits, it wasn't automatic. There was a struggle, and you thought, oh, shall I stay? That voice right was there to stay in bed. Just get an extra 5-10 minutes, or just you can pray afterwards when you wake up and you've got to go to work, whatever it might be. Now, because we kept on consistently opposing that voice, no, I'm going to get up. No, eventually the voice became silent. And now it's no longer a struggle. That silence right there is what they call the nafs al-mutma'inna, the soul that is at rest, the nafs that has sakina, it has internal peace. That voice. And that happens to us. So this is how we oppose our hawa. Another way we oppose our hawa is by having no regard for people. What does that mean? Does it mean we don't care about people? Obviously not. It means we have no regard for their praise and their blame. Whether the praises or blame us, it doesn't motivate us. It doesn't change us. What changes us is the praise and blame of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What do they find praiseworthy? What do they find blameworthy? That becomes the force that propels us forward, rather than this force of what other people are saying. You want the praise of other people, or you want the criticism of other people. This is another way in which we oppose this hawa. So it's important we understand what hawa is, and then we work towards opposing, inshallah. So now if you continue, he continues on now, he's talking, he says, about it. Then he mentions this poetry that he says, he's talking about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this is Imam Ali al-Habashi. He says, huwa nuru mubin bihi tadayna, huwa da'i ila aqwa sabili. That he is the clear light. By him we have been guided. By him we have been guided. He is the caller to the strongest of paths. He's the caller to the most robust of paths. أتانا داعيا بالحق يدعو إلى الإسلام بقول ثقيل. He came to us as a caller to the truth. He called us to Islam with a heavy word, the qawl thaqil. This is the Quran itself. Inna sanuki alayka qawlan thaqila, that we will thrust upon you a heavy word. The Quran is weighty by nature. لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله. That if you had revealed, if you had placed this Quran, this Quran we had caused it to descend upon a mountain, it would have become rent asunder, turned to dust out of fearful awe of God. And yet the heart of the Prophet ﷺ was able to maintain that. The heart of the Prophet ﷺ was able to bear this heavy and weighty trust. This heavy and weighty trust. So he says this, and then he goes and he says, فَبَادَرَ بِالْإِجَابَ كُلُّ عَبْدٍ مُطِيعٍ لِلْإِلَهِ وَلِلرَّسُولِ. That every slave, every obedient slave, he runs, badara, he goes with immediacy to respond to this message. Any slave who is obedient to God and is obedient to the Rasul, he immediately goes. He immediately goes where? He immediately goes to embracing this message and responding to this message. And he says that all people of kufr, of disbelief, of rejection, of ingratitude, and baghi, of transgression, all of them reject and they turn away, and also all people of dalul, of people off the path, people of loss, all of these people. Then he says, فَفَاذَ الْمُقْبَلُونَ بِكُلِّ خَيْرٍ وَأَقْبَاهُمْ إِلَى الظِّلِّ ظَلِيلِ. That those who have accepted this, they become triumphant through all good, and their ending is like in the shade. And those who turned away from this nur, this light, which is Islam, those who turned away from it have lost, and their ending due to their sins is humiliation and torment. So he's really clarifying this beautiful lines of poetry, clarifying the difference between the path of haqq and the path of batil. And this is why we need to use our intellect. This is what they call tafriq, the furqan, the furqan. What is the furqan? The furqan is the differentiation between, the differentiation between haqq and batil. That's what the Faruq, Sayyidina Umar, is al-Faruq, because he's able to see between truth and falsehood. Ask Allah for tawfiq to allow us to see. Like the Prophet had this dua, Allahumma arina haqqan haqqan warzuqni ittiba'a. Wa arina batilan batilan warzuqni ijtinaba. That, oh Allah, show me truth as truth and allow me to follow it, and show me falsehood as falsehood and allow me to stay away from it. This is where the hawa, the passion, can blind the intellect. It can blind the intellect such that we can't see truth and we can't see falsehood, and we can become confused between these two realities. And we'll continue tomorrow, inshallah ta'ala. We're going to move to 6 o'clock. So I said tomorrow the lesson will be 6 o'clock, 6 till 6:30, inshallah ta'ala. And so tomorrow, and we'll be staying at 6 o'clock for a while, inshallah. So we're going to move to 6 o'clock, 6 till 6:30, inshallah ta'ala. If there's any questions, please ask. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Please could you try an Arabic course, which is so important that in this generation that our children are taught the meaning of the Quran, which many masjids don't incorporate, but should. Jazakumullah khair. Inshallah ta'ala, barakallahu feekum, there is an intention, inshallah ta'ala, to arrange an Arabic course for children for that very purpose, for the purpose of them being able to understand the Quran, access the Quran, rather than maybe like conversational Arabic, which also has its benefits. In terms of prioritization within our context, isn't necessarily the most important thing. Inshallah ta'ala, barakallahu feekum. If there's any questions, people can unmute their mic and ask, or they can put in the chat, inshallah. If there's any questions. Okay, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala sayyidina wa habibina Muhammad wa alihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.